Hello dear friends, we are together again in a new conversation within the boundaries of a new video. I have shared a few videos with you before on astral travel. All the information I talk about in these videos is based on the knowledge and experience I have gained over many years on this subject. As I have said in my videos before, astral traveling is not a special talent. Some people can do astral traveling consciously without any work, without any stimulation, and these people usually realize this phenomenon because of a shocking event in their lives. After this event, these people now see that some of their paranormal and metaphysical abilities are revealed. Shock situations after an accident or extreme fear and excitement can cause some people to involuntarily emerge and experience these phenomena. I was a 19-year-old boy when I had my first experience of astral travel, and I was not yet aware of anything. As the years passed, as I experienced more and more similar events, and as these events were connected with some dreams of some people, I realized over time that these were messages like a code sent to me from another dimension, so that I could realize and develop some of my abilities that I was not aware of. As the years passed, the lives of the people who entered my life and some paranormal events I experienced would lead me to the only person I would question all these things and get the answers to all these things, my Pineal teacher. This was nothing but the implementation of an eternally determined decision when the time came. My master would pass on his knowledge to me before he passed away from this mortal world, and I would entrust the knowledge I had received from him to a person whose decision had already been made. In this cycle that had been going on for 1,000 years, I would now be one of the links in that chain. Now the process was starting to work and waking me up. This was my first paranormal experience. In those years, the thing I was most excited about was going hunting with my father. When I was 19 years old, my father gave me a beautiful rifle with a single breech rifle as a gift. I was very happy about it. Now I could hunt with him with my own rifle and shoot cartridges. That weekend, on a Saturday morning, we made our preparations and set off early for the hunt. The year I am talking about was 1991. It was the year before I would go to university, and my life would change completely. I remember the day very well. On Saturday, November 20, the city we lived in used to be very cold in those seasons, and snow would never be missing from the higher parts of the city for 4 seasons. But in the region we were traveling to, where there were high-altitude hills and rocky cliffs with a lot of wild diversity, the rocks we were climbing became slippery and dangerous with the light rain. My father and I started looking for prey on the plains of the hill we climbed at 2 extremes out of each other's range. The region had plenty of hunting grounds. I was excited. I had a brand new rifle of my own, and I was going to be the first to pull the trigger, while trying to warm my cold hands with my breath. I saw something moving in the bushes in front of me. It was a nice fat rabbit. I aimed the rifle correctly. The rabbit was climbing the rock with not too hasty steps within my shooting range. I could have hit it, but I don't know why I couldn't pull the trigger, dear friends. I just stood there. Something inside me prevented me from shooting that animal. I thought that the indecision I was experiencing at that moment was due to the excitement I was experiencing, and I decided to go after the rabbit, which was out of range but still in my sight. I was climbing the rocks with ambition and speed. Occasionally I would pause to see the animal that had disappeared from my sight, and I would follow the traces it left on the thin layer of snow. I had climbed the rocks quite a lot while I was going after the rabbit with this ambition. I could see my father like a tiny figurine in the hut below. Gasping for breath, I crouched down to catch my breath. As I waited for the pain in my legs to subside, I saw the rabbit at the bottom of a cliff, huddled up. It was so close to me that if I took a few steps I could have grabbed it with my hands. I pointed the rifle, I aimed again, but no, I can't pull the trigger. Something in my gut is preventing me, I can't do it. I couldn't pull the trigger, I couldn't shoot that rabbit. That's when I realized, dear friends, okay, hunting is a good thing. Traveling through the mountains and plains is a good thing. But taking a life is not for me. Demoralized, I started to descend down to the rock I had climbed, all the while complaining to myself. While trying to descend from the rocks, which became wet and slippery with the accelerating rain, without tumbling, the thing I was afraid of happened to me. When I opened my eyes, I don't know how long I had been lying at the bottom of that rock, but when I came to, I couldn't understand what had happened. It all happened so suddenly. The last thing I remember was slipping and tumbling down the cliff and hitting my head on a rock, and I don't know how long after that, just darkness. I checked the place where I hit my head on the rock with my hand. I looked at it, there's nothing, I don't feel any pain, I don't feel any pain. I'm glad you're not bleeding. I stood up, I checked left and right. The place where I fell was quite high, but thank God I was okay, and I was very lucky that I was still alive and I didn't break anything. I remembered my rifle. I looked left and right for it, but I couldn't see it. I thought it had slipped out of my hand as I fell and got stuck at the bottom of a rock. I called out for my father, but I didn't get a response. I called out again. I called out once more towards the plain below. Again, no sound. That's when, dear friends, I was almost speechless at the sight I saw. As I regained consciousness, I began to realize the environment and looked around in astonishment. Everything was green. It was a sunny morning, as if it was summer. Birds singing, insects flying, bees buzzing. This is not possible. No. It had to be fall. We came here with my father to hunt in November. It's quite hot, and as I said, nature doesn't have the nakedness, coolness and silence of an autumn month. Everything is alive. Everything is green, with a clear, cloudless sky. I was scared, very scared. I kept calling out to my father as loud as I could, trying to figure out what was going on, but I couldn't get an answer. As I was going down the cliffs, of course, I came across another surprise. Just below, the stream that flowed like crazy in winter had dried up, and just above the stream was a village with 8 or 10 houses. No, there wasn't a village here. The nearest village was about 20 kilometers away from where we were. This was an area completely inhabited by wildlife, not suitable for settlement. And even though we had been here many times before, there was no way I hadn't seen that village by that stream. I was about to lose my mind, dear friends. I looked around in fear and panic and wondered if I was dreaming. I slapped myself left and right, but no, it was not a dream. Everything is real. I feel the rock I touch. I see the soil I step on. I breathe in and out. And I'm scared like I've never been scared before. In my desperation, loneliness and fear, I hurried down from the rock. Continuing to call out to my father at the top of my lungs, I ran back to where we had left the car. There was no car. What's more, the place where the car should have been was covered with a dense thicket of brush and trees. So my strength was completely gone. I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't understand. What was happening in this place where I'd come to hunt with my father on a cold November day? When and how had the season changed? Where was my father and how had he left me here? I was confused. What had happened when I had fallen from that cliff and now I was here alone on a summer day? What did all this mean? And that village, what was that village? I tried to find a logical explanation for my situation, but all the alternatives I thought of were losing their validity in the face of an oxymoron. How had I come from a November morning to a warm, green summer day? I decided to go to that village, hoping to find a phone in the village so I could call my father and tell him I was here. At that moment I was startled by a sound I heard. At first I was frightened, but then I calmed down because I had heard this sound before and knew it. The call to prayer was being called from the side of the village, dear friends. A very sharp and beautiful call to prayer. It echoed in the steep cliffs and valleys on the other side. It added a magical atmosphere. I set off thinking that if I went to the village they would help me. I was nervous, lonely, and still thinking about what had happened. As I passed through the thin flowing water in the dry stream bed, I realized that I was thirsty. I squatted on the edge of the stream to drink some water and wash my face. After drinking a few sips of water in my palms, I washed my face. I looked at the water to see if there were any bruises on my face. I couldn't see myself. I was surprised. I looked again. I got closer and looked again. No, I couldn't see my reflection in the water. How could I not see my reflection in the water? I stirred the water in my hands. I felt its wetness and coldness. I took it in my palms and put it back. Yes, it was water, but why couldn't I see myself in it? I could see the reflection of a bird passing overhead in the water, but I couldn't see my reflection in it. My fear was again aroused by these oddities. I set off for the village again, still in doubt as I looked back and forth at the water with fearful eyes. Am I having a nightmare? No, I am not dreaming. I'm alive, I see and feel everything, and it's not the first time I've had a dream. It's not like any dream I've ever had before. Everything is so vivid, so real, and none of my dreams have ever lasted this long. I don't know if it was the hot weather or the strangeness I was experiencing. I was sweating profusely. I had come to the village, but now I was afraid of the village. I didn't know what I would encounter in the village amidst so much strangeness. I started walking through the village on a narrow dirt road, but it was as if it was abandoned. There is no sound, just like I don't see people. I don't see any animals either. Can't there be animals in a village? Not a chicken, not a cow, a goat, a dog, nothing. The houses are quite old but well maintained. I both want and don't want to meet anyone. I am all alone. I kept walking in this strange village I had never seen before, looking around me and often looking back. When I saw smoke coming out of the chimney of a village house I came across, I was both happy and scared. What would I say if I went there now? How would I explain who I was, what I was doing here, and what I was going through? As I got closer to the house, I realized that this was not a house but a village cafe. 5 people were coming out of the house, which I understood to be a mosque with a small minaret just ahead of it, and they were heading towards the village cafe with heavy steps. When I saw them, I felt insecure. I hid behind a bush and watched them, trying to regain my courage. They entered the village coffee house chatting among themselves. For a while I looked around to see if there was anyone else around. I guess there were no other people or creatures living in this village other than these 5 people. I still didn't see the vitality that a village should have around me. I tried to make a decision by looking at the village cafe from where I was hiding. I was scared, but the voice inside me was telling me to trust them, and a suggestion was echoing in my brain that no harm would come to you from them. As I was thinking this, I realized that the bush I was hiding in was a blackberry bush. There were some ripe berries on the bush. I plucked 1 or 2 and ate them. I felt their flavor and juiciness. As I ate the berries, I thought, if this blackberry had produced fruit, it must have been June or July. The weather was hot as it is in those months. But I had come here this morning on a cold November day to hunt with my father. Now this situation must come to an end. I had to find out what was going on, so I rose from my crouch like a bully. As I walked confidently towards the village cafe, I made myself a weapon out of a dry twig I found on the ground. In other words, I tried to feel stronger with this piece of twig. I approached and took a step inside the open door of the cafe and stopped, dear friends. My heart was beating like it was going to stop from excitement as I peered inside. The inside was very small and filled with such antiques. There were 3 wooden tables, a few wooden chairs, a teapot tinkling on a stove, and very plainly dressed people. There were 5 men, 2 of them old, 3 middle-aged, and an antique radio. I bowed my head slightly and said hello. The people there looked at me as if they didn't recognize me at all. You know the way a person looks at a stranger? He shows it with his gestures and looks. There was no such reaction from these people towards me. There was no trace of the suspicion I was in on their faces and in their looks. They did not ask me who I was. As if we were acquainted, one of them gestured with his hand, smiling. He said to me, "Come and sit down, son, take a breath." He pointed to the chair next to him. I didn't sit where he pointed, but sat on a chair at an empty table, and I continued to stare at them. These men were as strange as the situation I was in. They were acting calm and relaxed as if I was someone they knew and not a stranger. Their looks, the expression on their faces confirmed what my inner voice was telling me. Yes, they didn't seem like people to be afraid of at all, but their attitude towards me was also confusing me. One of the men got up from his seat. As he got up, the oldest of them told him to turn up the radio. The man turned up the radio. No one is talking inside. 4 of the men are sitting. They are watching me as if they are waiting for me to say something. One of them was pouring something into glasses from the steaming teapot on the stove. Now they were all listening to the sound of the radio. The announcer was presenting the news on the radio, dear friends. Inevitably, of course, I was hearing what the announcer was saying. A woman's voice on the radio was reading a statement by Prime Minister Bülent Ecevit, saying that Turkish troops had gone to the island to bring peace not only to the Turks, but also to the Greeks. What? What Bülent Ecevit? I mean, what soldier? What island? We are in the year 1991 and Mesut Yilmaz was the Prime Minister that year. While I was shocked by what I heard on the radio, others were acting as if this was normal, discussing the news among themselves and giving thanks and praise. As I was trying to understand what had happened with this shockwave I was experiencing, my eyes fell on the leaf calendar on the wall. I got up and looked at the calendar. July 20, 1974. No, I mean the year is 1991, the 2nd of November. It must be Saturday. No. I looked again. I read it again, touching it with my hand. July 20, 1974. It's Saturday. I mean, this is nonsense. It's impossible. What am I doing here on this date this year? I looked and looked. My heart was pounding. My legs were shaking with fear. While I was in this state, the others were calm. After the man at the stove served the others, he left a teacup on the empty table where I had just left. He smiled with his eyes on my face and said, "Come, my son, sit down and drink it hot, so that it will calm you down. Don't be afraid. You are in our care." I was now thinking that I had lost my mind, that my mind was playing tricks on me, or that I was dead. How could I have gone back 16 years by falling while chasing a rabbit on a rock? I mean, how could this happen? On July 24th, 1974, I was a 3-year-old child. I put my head in my hands and threw myself out. I mean, I didn't understand. I was scared. I was running around like a madman. I was helpless. I didn't know how to get out of this or what was going to happen next. As I was running around like a madman panicking, I heard a thud. It was as if the earth beneath my feet was shaking. I thought it was an earthquake, but a hum was getting closer and closer. A confused, muffled, meaningless hum. I looked around and tried to understand what was happening. I soon realized that it was coming from the hill opposite. The humming was getting closer and closer. I couldn't think of anything anymore. And I was so helpless, so scared, that I saw my body freeze, the blue of the sky dissipate and be replaced by gray clouds. The lush green grass dried up beneath my feet. The trees quickly shed their leaves and became bare. And from the hills opposite I saw an army of horses galloping towards me. They were coming so fast that in a few seconds they were beside me. They continued to pass me on both sides without stopping. They are coming down the hill in 2 columns. One column was passing on my right and the other on my left. On strong and righteous horses were men whose faces I could not see. While they were passing by me with their imposing and upright postures, a horseman was approaching me from the gap in the middle. I have never seen such a sight, such speed in my life, dear friends. The man on the horse was approaching me as if he was going to crash into me. While the other arms were rushing past me on my right and left, he continued to approach me on a horse in the middle. He was going to hit me, but I couldn't move, as if my feet were involuntarily fixed there. I felt a chilly wind blowing, and I felt the raindrops hitting my face. The rider was going to hit me. He kept coming at me with his white cloak fluttering on the horse. I closed my eyes. I surrendered to whatever was going to happen. I could only say, "God, please." When I opened my eyes for a moment, I saw that the horseman grabbed me by the collar with his hand and threw me into the horse's saddle with an agile movement. The hand that grabbed me had a shining silver ring on his finger. Was the last thing I saw. When I opened my eyes, I was lying at the foot of the rock. For a few seconds, I couldn't move from where I was lying. Then I got up with a sudden movement and looked around, trying to collect my thoughts. The air was cold. The ground was bare. The rocks were wet. The trees were bare. The stream below was gurgling, and there was no village on its banks. I felt my head hurt, and when I touched it, it hurt even more, and blood stained the tips of my fingers. Fear came over me again. It had all started when I fell down this cliff. I thought of my father. I called out, got no response, stood still for a few seconds, then wondered if I was facing something strange again. And this time when I called out to my father in a louder voice, I heard him respond. Thank God. I was back to normal, and as I was trying to climb down from the rock with the joy of being where I was when I was averse, I collapsed. I felt the pain in my leg. I had broken my ankle when I fell, and there was a throbbing in my left shoulder. I kept calling out to my father at the top of my lungs. Of course, my father had already realized that something had happened from the panic in his voice and came to me immediately. He took me to the hospital. My left ankle was broken and my shoulder was cracked. I had 7 stitches in my head wound. I got out of the hospital 3 days later, and for a long time I woke up scared. And for a long time I kept a desk calendar with me. In those days and for a few months afterwards, dear friends, I became obsessed with looking at the calendar whenever I thought of it. Thank God I was now in my life where I was averse in the year I was averse. I did not tell this incident to my father or anyone else. Years later I shared it with only 2 people, one of whom was my teacher and the other was my wife. Dear friends, now I am telling it to you here. I learned what I experienced that day years later from my Pirim, thanks to his wisdom. When I fell from that cliff, I was trapped between life and death for a very short moment. My soul had experienced what I am describing in the point dimension of time, having leapt into one of the parallel universes that are like intertwined rings in a journey to a century that it experienced with that shock. There was no time. Time was a point. Within that point, there were countless universes and lives. My soul experienced a different life in one of those universes. This was my first experience of traveling to the century when I was not yet aware of anything. Now, if you ask why the day of the Cyprus operation, who were those men in that village coffee shop? If you ask why they told you that you were entrusted to us, and if you ask who was that army and that horseman who I thought was the commander at the head of that army, the answer to all these would be revealed by the connections I would make between the paranormal events I would experience later, the people I would meet, and the dreams I would see. In the realm of pens, a pen had already written and drawn everything, and the process had begun with this event I experienced. Years later, according to the information I received from the cadastral directorate of that region, dear friend, there had never been a village or a settlement by that stream in that region. Yes, our story will continue in another video. I will continue to share with you the paranormal events and metaphysical connections I have experienced for almost 30 years. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to be informed about new videos. Until we meet again, God bless you. Stay in good health.